boys and girls, are you ready to read our story? It's called Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble. The topic of our story is how can helping others make you feel good? And I want you to take a second just to think about that. When we talk about bucket filling, we say that when someone says something nice to you, your bucket fills up. You also fill other people's bucket when you're nice to them. So if you give someone a compliment, they get something in their bucket and so do you. So why is that important? How can helping other people make you feel good? Think about that as we're reading the story. The skill that I really want to focus on is called story structure. And within story structure, we have important parts of stories. We have the characters. Those are the people or the animals that the story is mostly about. The setting is where the story takes place. Where are the characters in the story? The problem is something that goes wrong. And the solution is the way the problem is solved. So let's get started. The story is called Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble by Marianne Kokaleffer. Mr. Tanen loves being the principal of Lyndhurst School. He also loves ties. In fact, he has almost 1,000 crazy ties. When Mr. Tanen returned from winter vacation, he received a phone call from Mr. Apple at the school department. Mr. Apple told him that because many things at the school had to be fixed, there wasn't enough money for a playground. Let's stop for a minute. Who is the character so far in our story? Yeah, you're right, Mr. Tanen. The setting is at Lyndhurst School because that's where they are. And the problem, what's the problem? Yeah, you're right, there isn't enough money for the playground. But why not? Why isn't there enough money? Oh, I know, because right here in the story, using text evidence, I can see that it says the school had so many other things that needed to be fixed. So they didn't have enough money. Mr. Tannen sadly hung up the phone and gazed out at the broken down playground. He heard a clink, clank. He looked up to see Kaylee and Alex lugging a big jar filled with money. Here it is. $148.29 for the playground fund, said Kaylee proudly. New playground, here we come, cheered Alex. Mr. Tannen didn't know what to say. Wow, so it seems like these two students really want to try to pitch in and get a new playground. But they have to raise money first. After school, Mr. Tannen sat in his office staring at the jar. He sighed. Now I'm in a real pickle. This isn't enough money for our playground. The kids will be so disappointed. Mr. Apple's words floated around his head. The playground will have to wait. You'll think of something. I wish our account was as full as your tie closet. As full as my tie closet? Repeated Mr. Tannen. What do you think he's gonna do? Make a prediction. If he has almost 1,000 ties and he needs money for the playground, what do you think he might do? Don't tell me. Think about it. If you know it, hold it. I'll ask you to throw it to me at the end. He jumped up, opened his closet, and shouted, "That's it, my ties! Lyndhurst School will have a new playground." So did you get it right? Did you know that he was going to sell his ties? The next day, the entire town was plastered with signs. Mr. Tannen's tie auction Saturday at 7 p.m. at the Lyndhurst School. A tie for any occasion, all ties must go. Down here it says, what does Mr. Tannen do to help raise money for the playground? What does he do? He wants to sell his ties. You're right. Mrs. Sweet Apple noticed the sign on the grocery store window. She called her husband, Mr. Apple. Why is Mr. Tannen selling all his ties? Has he gone crazy? Mr. Apple told her about the school budget and the playground money. The town was buzzing all day. Mrs. Sweetapple called Monsieur Bijon at the bakery, who called Cleo at the cleaners, who called Dr. Demi at the dentist. It went on and on until Zach, the night watchman at the zoo, even got the word. Mr. Tanen is selling his ties? The town is buzzing. On Saturday, the whole town showed up for the auction. Monsieur Bijon started the bidding. I'll give you $50 for the donut and Danish tie. Lolly, the librarian, bought a book tie. Dr. Demi, what do you think Dr. Demi is going to buy? She's a dentist. I'll give you a clue. Yeah, she was the proud owner of the toothbrush tie. Kaylee handed over her entire piggy bank for the hot dog tie. Mrs. Sweetapple just had to have the wedding bells tie. She must be getting married. And of course, Mr. Apple chuckled as he paid quite a bit of cash for the crab apple tie. Oh my goodness, it's working. They're raising money. The auction was a huge success. Every tie was sold except one. Mr. Tanen couldn't part with his beloved blue ribbon tie. It was a present from Mr. Apple for being a great principal. He looked out at a sea of townspeople, all wearing his ties. Thank you all. I have always taught my students, the more you give, the more you get. With this money, the Lyndhurst School will have a new playground. Mr. Tanen swallowed hard. My ties now belong to the town. Wear them proudly. And throughout the spring, that's just what everyone did. Boys and girls, I want you to think for a minute. What does Mr. Tanen mean when he says, the more you give, the more you get? How can helping others make you feel good? I think what he means is that when you give things to people or when you make people feel good to help others, you feel good. So the more that you give to others, the feelings that you get in your heart are going to grow and you're going to feel much better. But sometimes Mr. Tanen would forget his closet was empty. He would open it up to get a tie, and with a tingle of sadness, he would remember. He only had one tie, and he was wearing it. Then he'd look outside at the beautiful playground that was built. You have to give to get, he thought. Soon it was opening day at the new playground. Mr. Tanen had invited the whole town to the ribbon cutting ceremony. He tucked his speech in his pocket, grabbed his special scissors, and adjusted his tie. He wished he had an official ribbon-cutting tie. The schoolyard was overflowing with people. Mr. Tanen made his way through the crowd. What clues in this story tell you that Mr. Tanen misses his ties? What clues? Yeah, it says right here in the text that he would get a tingle of sadness when he opened up and realized he only had one tie. Do you boys and girls see how I'm using text evidence to answer the question? I'm looking back in the story and finding the clues that help me to figure it out. Take a moment and look at that picture. What did they all do? Then he saw it. The playground was tied with a giant ribbon made from Mr. Tanen's ties. Oh my goodness, and they named it after him. It's called Mr. Tanen's Playground. Look again. Wow, that's awesome. Sweet Mrs. Apple and Mr. Apple were at the microphone. Mr. Tanen, you have taught us all. The more you give, the more you get, said Mrs. Sweetapple. You have given us a playground, and we are giving you back your ties. With that, Mr. Apple untied the tie ribbon and announced, Mr. Tanen's playground is now open. Why do you think the townspeople decided to give him his ties back? Mr. Tanen and his ties were together again. He slipped on his swing and slide tie and smiled. Wow. So boys and girls, I have one more question for you. How does Mr. Tanen solve his problem? So his problem was that they didn't have enough money for the playground. Well, how did he solve his problem? What did he do? Think about it. If you know it, throw it. I caught it. Tell me. You're right. He sold his ties. He had a tie auction, and he raised a lot of money, honey. Yes, he did. All right, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that story. Remember, our skill for this week was character setting, problem solution, all have to do with story structure. And remember, the more that you give, the more that you get.